That's awesome. We'll reintroduce everyone. So we have Michelle Gray here, who is a CPA and money mindset coach with us. And she is here on tax day. Hi. We have Alejandra Moreno, who is an estate planning attorney. And we have Amelia Bender, who is the founder of Mills Knows Bills and a budget setting coach. So we are super excited. Thank you so much, ladies, for being with us. Thank you for being part of this conversation. And I'm also excited because these are real amazing experts in our community who also are kind of like take on the different pieces of this money conversation. So we are going to dive right in shortly, but before we get started, we do want to start this conversation in a very uniquely comadres way. And the way is like grounding in our joy and the things that bring us peace and ground us into what's important. And so the question is, what are you grateful for today? So Michelle, you want to kick it off?
Yes. So I'm grateful for my health and my family. Everyone is healthy and well. I'm grateful that I can work from home and that the economic impact payments are out.
Yes.
I've actually seen $1,200 deposits in personal bank accounts. So I'm very happy. The IRS is working.
Amazing. That's amazing. That's good news. So if you were expecting one of those, go check your bank account right now. And maybe you can start this conversation from a place of like, yay, abundance.
Abundance.
Yes. Cool.
I'll go ahead. I am grateful for life kind of slowing down and being cooped up at home with the kids. I feel like, we rush out to the office, we rush back home, we rush to the gym, we rush, and it's, bedtime. And now we have so much time together. And, instead of being bored, we have to be creative, to find things to do. So I'm actually very grateful for life just slowing down a little bit.
Good.
And I think I'm actually going to piggyback off of that one a little bit. So normally my husband travels every week and has been for the past 2 years of our marriage. And since quarantine and everything, that's put it on a drastic halt. And we have never spent so much time together in one amount of time. So as different as things may be, it's honestly, it's been great. We've grown, we've got to hang out with each other, which has been a lot of fun.
That's amazing. That's very sweet. Thank you, everyone. I keep saying this, but it's very heartening to see how simple the things that we're grateful for are now, and how this is what was really important all along, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're just kind of remembering it. And so we get to dive into a conversation about money. And I am really glad that I am hosting this conversation today, because I want to kick it off from a place of like where it all began, right? And for me, I like definitely was somebody who was more like, I was more into like history and literature and the arts, and not into the numbers, even as I was growing up. And so for me, and I know that so much around money has to do with like not only kind of like what you feel like you're good at, but also the influences that you had in your younger years. And so I just saw my parents being like pretty responsible with it, but I was never like, I was like, oh, if I make $10, I will spend 8 and save 2. Okay, cool. Like, that's all I need to know. Bye. And so I think that for most of my life, I lived that way. But then I became an entrepreneur. And then I realized that I needed to invest money in order to grow a business, and in order to invest in myself in order to continue to grow. And let's just say that equation got like a lot more complicated than if you make $10, you spend 8. That's been more like you spend 20, and then like you hedge your bets, and then the risk and the thing. And then, and it's interesting because, to be perfectly frank, it has brought up in me a lot of like the work around like really looking at my numbers and looking at money and how I really think about money. Like that this whole situation of becoming an entrepreneur has woken up in me a lot of questions that I probably should have been addressing my whole life when it comes to getting my stuff together and the way I think about money. So I'm like curious if you could each briefly kind of tell us your stories about like how you wound up doing this for a living, and like why like this was like, yeah, I want to like work with money all day long.
Well, I was pretty much, I mean, I love my parents, but at 17, like when I was graduating high school, they were like, well, you're going to take over the business. So instead of being an engineer, we want you to do like business administration. And I saw the curriculum, I'm like, no, that's too easy. The one that is like the most complicated, I'll do accounting. And I love numbers. Like my parents were entrepreneurs my whole life. So I'm very familiar with the investing in yourself and investing in the business. And, you know, maybe you wait 2 years until you see some money back. So that's pretty much it. Like I was really conditioned around money and I feel very comfortable with it. And, you know, with abundance and having like a positive mindset. And, you know, even though you're not making that much money, you know, it's coming because
Yeah.
you keep that positive thinking and you know it's coming and you know you deserve it. So that's how I ended up doing
That's
accounting.
amazing. I always love listening to Michelle because I'm like, can I just like, I used to do it in person, but now I'm like, so can I just Zoom Rob off of you? So a little bit of that like rubs onto me. Yeah, cool. Thank you. So like having that in your family and seeing that like entrepreneurship and like interest in money from the beginning, that's cool. Amelia, what about you?
So Gabby, kind of similar to yours, you know, in my family, we talked about money. It was something that always kind of existed, but it was never a main topic of conversation. There was no moment in my life where I remember sitting down and truly learning about money and all that goes into it. And it wasn't until my freshman year of college, I was about to go get something to eat, and I took a look at my bank account and I had $1.50 in my account.
Oh my God.
That was it. I had no credit card to fall back on because I didn't know how credit cards worked. I didn't have any savings account. I mean, when I tell you I had $1.50 in my account, that was all I had. Nothing else in my wallet. And that was really a pivotal moment for me at 18 years old. I'm sitting there thinking to myself in my dorm room, where do I go from here? What went wrong? Why did this happen? And how can I move on? And at the time I was studying management, and I decided I need to completely overhaul my major. And if I'm going to do college, I'm going to do it right and learn as much as I possibly can from this. So I changed my major to finance. And for the past 5 or 6 years now, I have completely studied all aspects of finance, both personal and, you know, professional. And I really implemented budget setting strategies and learning as much as I possibly could, because I felt like I missed a day in life class, as Jamie and I always talk about.
Yeah.
But in reality, no one talks about it. You're not taught in high school. You're not taught in middle school. Most of the time, we're not taught from family members because they weren't ever taught it either.
Exactly.
So I kind of wanted to be that change for myself and my family. So I've really just been pouring myself into it and been taking that information and testing different theories and strategies to see what works, so that way I can change my family and friends' learning curves. So that's kind of how I got thrown into it.
Cool.
So I guess I also am a similar case. You know, growing up, I grew up with a single mom, and to this day, she'll tell me, I have no idea how I made my paycheck stretch and afforded what we were able to afford, but she always instilled in me working hard. So I always had enough money to get by. I never really thought about saving or investing. And then I graduated from law school. I had 6 figures in debt. I was making peanuts, and I was like, I'm not that good at math, but something is not adding up
Something
here.
is off here.
So I started discovering, like, you know, the kind of, I don't want to say Mickey Mouse, but the, you know, the Susie Ormans and the Dave Ramseys that kind of just gave me these really solid principles to start reorganizing myself in the way I thought. And finally 1 + 1 started equaling 2, and, you know, I was able to pay down debt. We saved up, we started a business, my partner and I, and things started to organize themselves so that I had a clearer picture of my finances. So I think and what Amelia was saying too, I think that there's a lack in knowledge at a young age. I don't know if it's a day in life that we're missing, or like a day in high school or a day in middle school, that they should be teaching us these things so that we have just at least a foundation, so that when we go off to college, we're starting our life, not just our our educational life, but like our financial life as well. So I think there's a big need for that, and there's a lack right now. And I'm hoping that all of us that are experiencing this maybe a little bit later than we would like, we can translate that to our kids so that, you know, there's kind of a correction there.
Yes, thank you. And I think it's important to like have like this whole range of stories, because it's inspiring to see that it's not the kind of thing like, oh, if you didn't get it when you were 7 or 13, then you're doomed for life. Like that you can actually develop these habits and really develop a practice and your own internal processes to figure out your money and manage it responsibly. I would like to kind of kick things off then with like a conversation about just why this is important in the first place. I feel like I know a lot of entrepreneurs who are kind of just existing in the dark when it comes to their numbers, and just kind of like, you know, kind of covering their eyes and like hoping that at the end of the month everything balances out and that like it's okay. And yeah, there's debt and there's interest, but they don't really want to look at it. Like, why is it important for us to really face this and sort of like look at it head on, no matter how scary it is, no matter how big it might seem?
I guess I'll start. So, you know, I've sat down with a lot of clients lately, especially during quarantine. And one client in particular had, you know, almost 6 figures of debt, and it wasn't student loans. It was across credit cards, poor spending, you know, whatever it may be, it was just astronomical. And this particular client had been putting off setting a budget and looking at their numbers for years, just because they didn't want to know. They were so afraid of it. And it wasn't until we sat down together and I explained, you know, once you have it all in one place, and once you start setting a budget and looking at it and reviewing it, number one, it's not as scary as you think. And number two, by looking at it and taking control of it, you have that freedom, and then your finances are no longer controlling you. By instilling that fear and never looking at it, you are inherently giving it control over your life. And money and budget setting is not meant to control your life. It's meant so you can live your life and live it freely and happily. So it's really important to understand, you know, what you have and what you don't have, so you can move in the direction that you want to move in, but don't be afraid of it.
Okay, I completely agree. Money, if you think about money, money is neutral. Is what energy you give to it. You know, if you're afraid of it, then you're going to fight it, and you're going to be super resistant to seeing your numbers, to seeing your bank accounts, to seeing your credit cards. While you approach money with awareness and being positive and thinking of abundance, then doing a budget and seeing your numbers or doing your accounting every month, it becomes a tool that helps you make decisions to pay down your debt, to invest in yourself and your business, and to, you know, save, take trips, you know, pay taxes, whatever you need. So again, money is neutral, is the energy that you give it.
Yeah, I like that. And I think once you have that relationship with money, you have that relationship with doing a budget, you know, it's something that you're active. You don't do a budget once and then you never look at it anymore. I mean, I look at my budget every day, and I see whenever I buy that soda or whatever it is, it goes into my budget, right? So once you have that relationship, you finally, you know, organized yourself. You finally got your finances together. What happens, for example, as an entrepreneur, what happens when you can't manage that money? What happens when you are not available for whatever reason? There is planning that goes into that as well. Going back to what I said about teaching our children, you know, we're teaching our children how to handle their finances, but what if they're not at an age where they can handle their finances? Who's going to handle it for them? So there is a lot that goes into planning, and it does have to do with the numbers, and it does have to do with your lifestyle, with your business, and it also has to do with who's going to handle that when you cannot. And I think that's a big deal. We're all young, we're all healthy. And this is actually the perfect moment to start thinking about it, right? Because it doesn't mean you have to pass away and you know, organize for that. It means, what if you're just unavailable for a short time? You know, you've worked so hard. Are you going to let it just all fall by the wayside because you didn't plan for that as well?
Yeah. And so I'm excited because this conversation gets to be a place of both mindset and like specific practical strategies. And maybe we can kick it off with like some mindset tips about like if you're somebody that you know that naturally maybe like your entrepreneurship is new for you, or even this landscape that we're entering right now, like there may be a lot of people that are watching that are unemployed for the first time in their lives, that maybe did not have an emergency fund set up. What kind like and like they're finding themselves in resistance to the situation and to what's happening. So rather than being like, okay, let me look at everything, let me plan, let me see what's coming in, let me like kind of take action, they're kind of feeling stuck right now, and in a place of scarcity and lack. And so could we just kind of go around and I would love to hear your thoughts on what's like maybe like one of the most powerful ways to pull yourself out of that, like to kind of really start maybe with a daily practice or something to shift your beliefs about money, and your thoughts about money and about what's possible when you're in hardship.
Well, one of the things that I do when I'm afraid, or I think that there is not enough money coming in, because as an entrepreneur, if you don't build, you don't get paid. Is that I have my affirmations, and I have 5 affirmations in front of me that every day I see them, I read them, and I feel them. When during this quarantine,
what are they?
afraid.
Tell them to us.
Wealth flows to me from all directions. My income is constantly increasing. I am abundant. Money is energy. Like all these things that, when I'm feeling afraid, I read them, I'm like, okay, I can come back to a place of being abundant and trusting that, is coming.
Yeah.
But during this quarantine, I have experienced a lot of fear and even fear around money, and crying. Feel your emotions. And once you have experienced all of that and you cry it out, or you journal it in, or you meditate it in, just move to these tools. Your vision board, if you prepare one, actually see it again and go into every single thing that you put in there. If it was a car, or saving money, or, I have a lottery ticket in mind. Whatever it is, just look at it and just
wait. Michelle has a lottery ticket, and she has
a winning lottery ticket. I'm like, this time when I want to win it,
this woman is not messing around.
No. So, having all these little tools that sometimes when you're in that place of scarcity, or you're feeling very negative, or, it's hard for you to practice it or see it. But I feel like once you have felt it and cried it out, it's easy to kind of see this. Even in my mirror in my bathroom, I have affirmations. So have your affirmations, have your tiny, even if it's a 5-minute practice where you're journaling, or you turn on a candle, or light up some incense, whatever create like a little, I don't want to call it a tradition, but like a little ritual that you do. Yeah. Yes, that you do every day, that brings you back to being positive and feeling, that you are abundant. And maybe right in this moment, you don't have that much money in your bank account, but it's coming. Trust that it's coming. That's what I do.
Cool.
Well, right when all of this kind of began, another comadre, Shuera, who is like, she's amazing. She invited me to do the Deepak Chopra Abundance, the 21-day Abundance Challenge. And it was like perfect timing. And I do invite anybody watching this, if you would like to do it, I would be happy to host it, because it's a beautiful, beautiful 21-day practice, especially at a time where I felt like I was in a mindset that abundance was lacking. Yeah. And by the time I finished that, I really was seeing abundance all around me. I felt so fulfilled. And I saw myself changing my conversation from I have to do this, I have to do that, to I get to. And I was like, today I get to get up and go to the office for a little bit. Today I get to do this. And, that shift, and being able to journal and just kind of get everything out that I didn't want in, and to bring in only what I wanted in, made a huge, I mean, I'm getting goosebumps talking about it now because the timing was just so perfect. And I found myself, even though I don't have a guided or a structured meditation, I did find myself, setting aside, like Michelle was saying, having a little ritual where the kids are asleep, my husband's showering. I have just like maybe 3 to 5 minutes to just be quiet in the dark in peace and just let out what I don't need and to take in what I still want to keep. So I think that was a beautiful journey for me. And I invite anybody who has an opportunity to do it. Now is a great time.
Yes. Amazing.
I think for me, I had a slightly different approach. So for those of you that don't know me very well, Mills Knows Bills is my after full-time job. I'm just getting it off the ground, getting it up and running. And I found out a couple weeks ago that I pretty much lost my full-time job where I make my money to help fuel Mills Knows Bills. Like Michelle said, I just felt everything. I let all the emotions come in. I probably cried 3 times a day, every day for 5 days. And I wish I was exaggerating, but I just needed to let it out. And once I was done letting it out, and it was actually my last day that I got a full paycheck. I said, you know what? I'm going to put my big girl panties on and I'm going to put my money where my mouth is, pretty much. I have an emergency fund set up for this. I like numbers. Numbers give me peace and calming. So I sat down for a couple hours and I completely reworked my budget with what I had versus what I didn't have, things that I had to pay versus things that were extras that might not have to, be added in just this month. And I completely reworked it. And that gave me a little bit of peace of mind because I looked at it and I said to myself, okay, I'm not dying. I can survive. This is as uncomfortable as this is, it's okay. And, quarantine in the grand scheme of things really is only going to affect most of us, from what I've seen, 1 to 3 months. And when you put that into perspective, you kind of see a light at the end of the tunnel. And that gives me something to look forward to because I'm using this time as a ramp up to keep moving. So for me, I felt everything, reworked my budget, and kind of became comfortable with the uncomfortable.
Yes, that's amazing. I thank you, ladies, for sharing those tips. And I think Amelia, you got into something that's it's like a nice segue into like the practical solutions and the practical things that we can do. And that idea that of I think every single person, especially right now, right? I feel like the vast majority of people's finances are being impacted in one way or another, unless you own Publix, right? Or something like that. So considering that, having that ability to sit down, for instance, for me, I had a chance to sit down and not only think about, okay, so what are some loans that I can apply to? And we had this conversation last week. So if you're wondering about that, look back at our conversation from last Wednesday and you'll see a nice recap of, as small business owners, what are some loans that you can apply for right now, and how does the unemployment work, and all of those details. So not only what is some money coming in from a stimulus package around what's happening, but also what's possible with my lenders, right? I deferred my car payments for 3 months. I've been able to kind of get in touch with my landlord and say, okay, this is how much I'm going to send you. And so she sent me a deferment agreement. And so having that understanding that all of that is game right now and all of that is possible. And so I'm wondering if you all have specific tips for this moment in time, for people to, whether they are starting to look at their numbers for the first time, or what are some things that are available to them now, or that should be available, or that they should be thinking about right now, in terms of longer term planning. And just taking a pause here to say we have quite a few people watching. So after this question, I would love for the rest of this conversation to be fueled by the questions that you have, that we have coming in from the community. So if you have questions about money, if you have questions about estate planning, if you have questions about taxes, now's your chance. Take advantage of these women and these experts. So let's kind of kick it off with what are some specific things that people can do or should be thinking about doing around their money at this time?
Well,
I guess I'll
I'm gonna
start.
leave,
Oh, go ahead.
no, I leave the budget to you.
Oh.
Uh, now, if you have a small business and you have employees, I recommend to do the loans, the EIDL loan, which is it will be
Or
forgiven.
even if you are a small business and you are your own only employee.
Yes, exactly. I think that right now, at least what the government and what I personally have been like worrying about is like, will I be able to pay my people? Because at no point I want to stop paying them or letting them go. Hello, I need them. Tax season, it was extended until July 15th. So, it's looking into your options, whether you are self-employed, sole proprietor, you have an S corp, a C corp, a partnership, whatever you have. What are your options through the EIDL loan or the PP loan? Also looking at your expenses. What are things that if you don't have an emergency fund to cover you for the next month or 3 months, what can you defer? Also expenses that you no longer need, like for example, if you work at an office and you pay for parking, stop paying the parking until you're back at your office. Like little stuff like that. Mills, you can do all the budgeting.
Well, it's actually a great segue because that's where I was going to kind of hop right in. So as Gabby and Michelle have mentioned, a lot of these lenders, they're, they normally have their business hat on, right? But we're seeing a lot of the human coming through. We're seeing a lot of lenders that are being a lot more understanding. I was with a client yesterday who called me and said, I have all these credit card payments coming out, but I know that my paycheck has been cut by about 50% for my entire household. I don't want to pay these and then have to not be able to afford groceries for my children. So a lot of times you can call your credit card companies and they will tell you the exact URL link that you need to go to apply to get this deferment. And there's no penalties. It's normally about a 30-day freeze, but you don't gain interest during that time. And it's a great way for you to free up that capital, which for most people is about $300 to $500 worth of a payment, depending on how high your credit card bill is. And if you are that, strapped for cash and that worried right now, do it. I know sometimes there's this psychological factor of, oh, but I'm postponing it. I've been doing so good about making all these payments on time. You're not making a payment on time. You're just putting a freeze on it. So give yourself that freedom, give yourself that ability to put food on your table and still live. I think the other part of it is, a lot of people do have a lot more time on their hands right now. If you have been wondering how to set a budget all these years, or you just don't know where to start today. I promise you, it's not as difficult as you think. And a lot, I've noticed with my clients that they don't give themselves enough credit.
Yeah.
And you have the time, you can do it. And, just overall, give yourself the freedom to still live a life during this time.
Yes.
And if you need support, we are here. Or at least I'm going to say I'm here. Give me a quick call, a text, an email.
Exactly.
If you need, and I love Excel, I have my budget in Excel. If you need, something, I'll send you my Excel so you can, do something similar. So if you're too afraid, because I've been afraid, not of money, but Gabby knows, I'm afraid of videos of posting on Instagram, and I needed a lot of support. Every time I'm posting something, I'm calling one of my girlfriends. I'm like, can you look at this before I post? Yes. If you need somebody to hold your hand, you have this community.
Yes.
So even if it's a 5-minute, 2-minute pet talk, a quick, budget in Excel, we are here to support you.
Yeah.
And there are so many resources, we're so connected. There's so much information out there. And if you have the knowledge to create an Excel spreadsheet, and if not, there's so many apps. There's the Every Dollar app, there's a budget. There's so many ways to do it. And instead of stressing about the phone not ringing, about clients not being able to walk through the door, use this time to work on the business, research all of these different opportunities. I know that my partner and I had sat down about a year ago and we said, look, let's pretend that the phone does not ring for 3 months. What do we do? And we knew that we had applied for a line of credit that we have open on the business, and we always have that available to us. So last week when we sat down and we said, let's apply to A, B, and C. Let's see what we can qualify for. And if we can't qualify for anything, we take out that line of credit that we opened a year ago. So we were already kind of ready for this. And I think, talking about what Amelia was saying, it's a good time to divide things. I'm a big fan of the minimalists, right? They have their website, they have their podcast, whatever, and they classify everything into essential, non-essential, and junk. And sometimes you look at things and you're like, oh, but I need this to live. If this is only going to last a few months, do you need it to live, or can you put it on hold for a couple months? You make the sacrifice, accept that, you're going to miss it and bring it back into your life when it's ready to come back.
Exactly.
So it's a great time to work on the business, work on yourself, and see what your options are. God forbid this never happens again, but if it does, this is kind of like the training grounds, and you're ready if anything ever happens like this again.
Yes.
And if it does, that you're surviving and you can survive.
Yes.
Right? A lot of people were afraid about it. I was afraid for it, but I'm still breathing. I'm still here, and you know that you can get through it. And if it were to happen again, we're all hoping that we're all a little bit more prepared for the next one.
Yes. So we have a couple questions in from Janine. She's asking, can you share some tips for getting out of debt as rebuilding your relationship with money? So how you can, as you're rebuilding your relationship with money, how can you also start to get out of debt? What are some good tips for getting out of debt?
I'm probably the least qualified to talk about this, but I did pay off 6 figures worth of debt.
That's not
wowza.
That is impressive.
And I didn't just really hold fast to any one technique, but I definitely think that, and he is an extreme, but I think the Dave Ramsey technique does work, and debt snowballing does work, because it does create a relationship with your debt, with what's coming in, what's going out, what's essential, what's non-essential, and it helps you chip away at, the lowest debt and the highest interest rate, and you really start to learn what you're paying instead of, there's a lot of I think it's called taking from Peter to pay Paul, it's no BS. This is what you owe, and we got to pay it down now, and he puts that sense of urgency into you. So I think that's a great resource. His podcast is great. It's kind of gets you pumped to pay down debt. Dave Ramsey. His technique is called the snowball technique.
Yeah.
You can find it online. It's very easy to work with, but I think it's a great step forward and kind of gets you pumped to just chip away at that debt.
Good. I want to just make the point too, that I feel what is an interesting kind of side effect that was maybe unexpected from this situation is that this, your life has just gotten simplified AF. Your life got incredibly simple. Most of us are really only spending money on food these days, primarily, right? Outside from all the fixed expenses of your life, there's been food. But and I'm not saying that other obviously things aren't important, and yes, support small businesses, yes, do what you can, but it's also become a very straightforward landscape and environment for you to really this is the simplest time you're ever going to be able to stick to a budget, is what I'm trying to say, right? There's the temptation of going out for drinks with your friends and going to the big dinner and oh, look at me, I'm at the mall, so I'm going to buy something that. All of that has been stripped away from you. So this feels almost like a perfect little container to figure it out. And then and establish your habits, and then from here then you can be okay, now that the world is opening slowly again, I know what it's like to hold on to my budget. I know what it's like to think about whether I want something a little bit more, or would I rather have it in an emergency fund? Because at the same time, I had a conversation a couple days ago with a business owner friend who, she runs a creative agency. She has maybe 3 or 4 employees. And she told me, Gabby, years ago, my father told me to start keeping an emergency fund, and this emergency fund is going to keep my employees employed through the summer. And it was just such a like, whoa, like it's such a big realization that when you really start, you just putting a little bit away and like shifting your priorities, like what's possible, right?
I definitely agree with you that it's a great time to reframe your mindset around money and implement new disciplines in your life. So going back to the debt question, if you're not sure what debt snowballing or debt stacking is, basically it's where you pay off one debt and you take that payment and you're paying the minimum on everything except for one, by the way. You put a little bit more towards one, and you take that payment once it's paid off in full and you stack it onto the next debt. So you're basically putting, the one that's paid off on top of the other minimum, and you keep paying them off till they're all paid off. I don't know if I explained that right.
Start with the one that has the highest interest rate.
Exactly. You start with the one that has the highest interest rate. And the reason why it's great to have this time to implement new disciplines in your life is because a lot of times we all just pay the minimums on our debt, right? I'm only obligated to pay $25 towards my credit card, so that's all I'm going to pay. It's never going to get paid off. I'm sorry. It's not. The interest is going to accumulate and compound a lot faster than you could ever pay it off. Take this time to implement new disciplines in your life. Set aside a portion of your discretionary income, so the money that you have left over after you're done paying for rent, paying for food, paying for gas, take a portion of that extra money and put it towards your debt. And after a few payments, it'll feel as if that was what you were always supposed to pay towards debt. And once you have that established, and once you pay off that first credit card loan, for example, and you take that monthly payment and you stack it onto another loan, it's easier because it's money that was all going towards debt in the first place. It's not like you're taking more money out of your pocket at that time unless you want to. So reestablish your mindset with money in terms of, giving yourself a different mindset, frame of reference, and, have this discipline that, this extra $100 is meant for debt. It's not meant for dining out. It's not meant for getting drinks. This is what it's meant for. And that's what I'm going to apply it towards until I'm completely debt free.
No, I completely agree. I went through it when I bought my house, and I had a lot more debt than I ever expected. And that's something that I did. I started, I got a line of credit. I'm like, okay, no more nails, no more lashes. Everything that was not necessary was
listen.
No
we're
more
all saving a lot of money in beauty.
No more, expensive gym memberships. I was working at home. So right now, like you guys said, we're in the perfect mindset. Something that I did is that instead of paying, or what I recommend, instead of paying the minimum, in each statement of your credit card, there is another minimum that tells you will pay this within 2 years or 5 years if you pay this amount.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit more than the minimum, but at least you're not accumulating that much interest, because at the end, you just end up paying interest and not the principal.
Yeah.
So try to pay a little bit more than the interest, a little bit more than the minimum. And, anything extra, just pay towards the one with the highest interest rate. If you are able to move or transfer everything to a line of credit or a credit card that has no interest, do that.
Do it.
If you have no interest for 8 months, 12 months, 18 months, 24 months, that's super helpful, because then you're only paying your principal and there's no interest involved. There might be a fee when you transfer everything, you consolidate your debt, because sometimes that's hard. You have 10 credit cards and you're like, where do I pay this? Oh, I don't remember my login. What's the minimum for that? So if you're not that very organized, and right now you have the time, consolidate everything into one if you can, and just make that one big payment to that one credit card or line of credit.
Awesome. The next question that we have is, Karina wants to know, until when do we have to do our taxes?
Michelle, that's you.
I love that she's asking this on April 15th. I love you, Karina.
My tax season just got longer.
Yes.
So pretty much all corporate and individual tax returns that were due today are due July 15th.
Mm.
And if you are due a refund, if you every year you get a refund, just file your tax return right now, get your refund direct deposit into your bank account, and move on with your life.
Yes.
If you're super sure you're gonna pay, you can wait, prepare your tax return, see how much you owe, and get organized so you can pay by July 15th, because interest, penalties, everything, it starts July 16th.
I have a question for Michelle. So you said that taxes are now due July 15th. Do you need to request an extension, or is it
No,
automatic?
automatic.
Oh, got it.
The
That's
same
important.
with economic impact payment, that's automatic too.
I love it. Cool. I definitely want to spend some time talking to all of you, but especially Ale, in terms of your recommendations on from an estate planning perspective, what people can and should be thinking about right now for themselves and for their families, and also, like, I think this has been a moment that for many different reasons has woken up our consciousness that this is something that we get to think about, not just when we are in our 60s and 70s, but that we can think about now when we're younger as well. And hello to those 60s and 70s people watching. But presumably you've already thought through this. So like, what should we be thinking about?
So I am a Cancer. So I believe that the universe is going to do and send whatever the universe is going to send. My husband is a Taurus. So my husband is not like that at all. He's actually the complete opposite. So he was like, when the universe does something that you weren't expecting right now in our lives, we're leaving behind kids and a house with a mortgage. So the universe is going to take care of everything, right? And I was like, man, I'm a estate planning attorney. I can't believe this guy's telling me this. So yes, he's absolutely right. And, you know, a lot of people that I deal with, our firm does a lot of estate planning for high net worth individuals. Yes. Most people are like, I don't need estate planning. I don't have anything. Well, when you sit down and do your budget, you see that you have one bank account. You have something. And it's important to know that even if you have one bank account, you need to do some planning, because it's not just about what if you pass away, which is important, and probate avoidance is very important. But what if you cannot manage that account? Do you want anybody managing that account? Do you want to decide who manages that account? Or do you want a court or a judge via Zoom to manage that account?
Mm.
And she has how many other thousands of cases to also manage. So if you can't, make payroll, if you can't sign those checks, who can? Okay. And it's very important to think about those questions, especially right now, because there is definitely a risk that some of us might be, quote unquote, out of the office for a few weeks, unexpectedly. Yes. So having those things in place is very important. If you have minor children, that is very important. If you have a bank account and you have a minor child as the beneficiary on that bank account, that is a huge mistake, because now, you're avoiding probate, but you're sticking your kids in the system of a guardianship. So there are a lot of questions that you need to be asking yourself, especially, and I'm not knocking the men that are watching this, but especially as women, we wear a lot of hats in a lot of different spaces. So if you're not there to wear that hat, who are you going to delegate this to? And I think it's important for you to make that decision now, instead of that decision being made by the universe or by a court of law. So we a lot of us have dependents, and that word is very powerful, because if you have people depending on you and you cannot perform, then what's going to happen to those people? So I think it's a great time to start thinking about the answers to those questions, and know that there are many resources online. Absolutely. If you need something a little bit more hands-on, then estate planning is very affordable, and you do not need something very complex. And sometimes you don't need a lot of estate planning. Sometimes you just need those tips on how to organize yourself, so that if you can't manage, you've already designated somebody to manage for you. So
Yes.
that's all very important. And estate planning is very customizable. So a lot of the intricacies of your business or my business that might not be the same, that can be included in your estate planning documents, in your advance directives. So now is a great time to get informed, to do a little bit of research, and to ask those questions.
Yeah, that's awesome. I remember that I got this advice when I first started my business, and it really served me because, again, like I was coming from a place of having worked in corporate for like 12, 13 years. So all of these things were like, quote unquote, taken care of for me. But the idea that as an entrepreneur, I needed to seek out my own life insurance because I have a kid. I also needed to seek out short-term disability. And this was like really, and like, honestly, that's the money that I spend every month that I'm like, brings me the most peace of mind. Because when you really think about it, like, for whatever reason, if I'm unable to work for a period of time, like how are things going to be covered? And so like having those, like thinking through those things as part of your business, as part of how you move through whatever you need to do. So we have another question from Karina Michelle. And it's like, what are your thoughts on balance transfer to have one payment?
I guess I'll take this one. I actually had this conversation with someone yesterday. It really depends on what the fee is, because sometimes you could be making a balance transfer that has a fixed fee of, let's just say $3,000, right? And when you take that into consideration, that interest or that fee percentage could potentially be higher than the interest rate that you were paying before.
Got it.
So I would just say make an educated decision. Look at the, if you're trying to consolidate or transfer two items, look at the interest rates you're currently paying, and then look at what the fee is and make sure that you are getting
like the fee of the balance transfer, right?
Correct. The fee of the balance transfer, because oftentimes there's this notion that, oh, the balance transfer is automatically going to be cheaper, and that's not always the case.
No.
So make sure that you have an educated decision before you just, move forward with it. But if it does make sense, I say go for it. Save that interest money if you can.
Awesome. So a reminder again, if you're watching, please send your questions. We do have a few minutes left, but I think like we can start. Is it cheaper than doing? Wait, I'm trying to see what's going on here. Oh, that your life insurance is cheaper than doing your nails.
It can be.
Oh, and then and Karina's saying the younger you are, the cheaper it is.
Yeah, it's true.
It is.
Something to
just lock that rate in early.
Yeah. So when you start this early, you can lock in a rate that is going to not go up as much as if you started doing it when you were like later on in life. Is that the case?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's this thing called the mortality table, and basically in any given age range, the younger you are compared to, same, specs, I guess, or same health level, whatever you want to call it, 20 years later, it's still going to be cheaper at 25 than it is 45 for the same amount of coverage. It's just how they calculate it. It's this whole algorithm, which if someone wants to know, it's nerdy cool. I'll go all into it, but I don't need to do that here.
Thank you for that. and like maybe that'll be like the next level lunch break class.
Maybe.
As we start wrapping up, like I would love to just hear kind of final thoughts from each of you in terms of, specifically in the context of the moment that we're living right now with the pandemic and, like being quarantined and having a lot of economic uncertainty. I think that it's really heartening to have this conversation with three women who are not only kind of badasses in their own right when it comes to money management, and are supporting other families and people through that. But at the same time, I feel like you all also, like, there's been a very like positive, optimistic, hopeful, abundant vibe to the way that you show up into this conversation. So kind of being all of these things, like what are some final thoughts that you have to people that might be like really scared right now, or feeling stuck, or feeling like attached to things, or like being afraid of what's gonna like there's so much unknown, right?
I think, Ali, you mentioned this earlier today or earlier in the video that, you know, a budget is something that changes often. Or Michelle, I don't know who mentioned it, I'm sorry. It changes often. And I think everyone needs to be okay with the fact that that is okay. Having a budget that changes is okay. I oftentimes will have this analogy of a belt loop, right? You want to make sure that the belt fits, but if it's too tight, you can't breathe. If it's too loose, it's not doing its job. So, and that belt might fit a little differently depending on how much we eat during quarantine or how much we work out and lose weight during quarantine, right? So
Yes.
have that analogy with your money management, with your life in general right now. You know, certain areas of your life, the belt loop might need to be tightened a little bit. Other areas might need to be loosened. And you know what? That's okay, because just as our bodies change, our life circumstances change, which means our finances change. So give yourself the luxury to loosen the belt loop or tighten it if you need to.
That's great.
And be kind to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone is going through the same thing. One of the girls said it, be comfortable with uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. That really resonated with me because I'm a Taurus. I love my routine. And all these changes really like made me crazy, especially during tax season. So just being comfortable with the uncomfortable, knowing that we're gonna get through this, that there are options, that right now, even if you're not making money, you have that chance to go inward and see what makes you happy. And maybe that, you know, helps you shift from, you know, instead of doing a corporate job, I'm going to start doing this thing that I love.
Yeah.
Or this time is giving us time to just pay attention to the essentials and pay attention to ourselves and do some self-care. So be gentle, mm-hmm. be loving to yourself. And when it comes to money, remember, you give money the energy.
Yes.
Money is neutral.
I think now, you know, to survive all of this, it's very important to change the narrative. You know, we think about our grandparents, you know, the things that a lot of them went through. They went through wars. They went through things that I think a lot of us can't even imagine. Yeah. Us that have families that are immigrants or refugees that had to leave everything, you know. A lot of us are sitting at home watching Netflix and ordering Amazon Prime, and we're complaining about this quarantine, and it's really not that bad. You know, if it's a survival issue, we live in a country where there are so many resources. Nobody is going to starve during this pandemic. We are very, very, very blessed, you know, and to link all of this to money, at least me, I've started to realize my biggest asset is not my house or my business. My biggest asset are my children, is my family. And and that's what I do all of this for, you know. So changing the narrative for me from, you know, stay safe, you know, we're all safe. It's more stay healthy, take care of yourself. And like Michelle was saying, be kind, be gentle. We're all in this together. And thankfully, it's not that bad.
Yes.
You know, we're all going to be okay. So I thank you for inviting me to this, because this has also brought me a lot of the reassurance and strength and things that I've been thinking about too. So thank you to the other panelists.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I think, like, to close it out, I definitely have felt that as somebody who like hasn't had money come, like hasn't had like thinking through money and planning money come like easiest first for me, it's been something that I've been very actively cultivating over the past few years. There's almost something weirdly, like, I can choose to see it as shackling or empowering. And it's the reality that, like, we're all wondering WTF with our money right now, right? Like, everybody is wondering that. And so, like, I find it, like, some people find it terrifying. I actually find it liberating, because it is giving me an opportunity to shift the way that I feel about it. And it's empowering me to really take a hard look at it and realize and set priorities and set my budget and do my planning. Like, I've been taking my own notes as you all speak. But it's like, the reality is like what you were saying, like, what's really important to me, like that kid over there is important to me. Like, our health is important to me. Like, how much I worry about money is going to go to like, it wasn't like, it had the number 2 spot. Now it's going to have like the number 8 spot. Like, and like, I don't need to be stressing about it to make it a priority. And like, you know, like we're going to make it out of this like safe and alive. And that's priority number 1. Like the money is not going to be what shackles me, because at the same time, like even in looking at all of this, some of us may have to make like bigger decisions about our lives. Like some people might have to move in with relatives. Some people might have to put their stuff in storage. Some people might, you know, and like honestly, I would invite people to kind of come from a place of unattachment and grounding in what you know for sure, and grounding in what's important to you, trusting your own ability to rebuild your life if that's what you get to do, and you're going to come back better than ever. But this is a moment that we are all experiencing, and so it's an invitation to release whatever shame you feel around money, whatever BS stories you have about how somebody else is better off than you. Guess what? We're all messed up right now. So like the best thing you can do is like, you know, shift your mindset, take the advice that we heard today, which is like sound and practical and amazing. And I just want to remind everybody that the Instagrams for these 3 incredible women are listed right here on the post. So please go ahead and follow them, stay in touch with them. I believe that there were some offers of budget spreadsheets that you can totally DM these ladies and get your hands on those, because I've seen both Michelle and Amelia's budget spreadsheets, and they're awesome. And so take them up on it. And when you feel like you need a little bit extra help, because we've given you a lot of tools that you can do right away today, but when you feel like you'll need a little bit of extra help, certainly reach out. And these incredible women are here and available to support you in your getting your money together. So thank you everybody for watching. Again, as we do every session, we have a link through PayPal. So if you are felt inspired by this conversation and want to contribute to the community, you can do it right there, or contribute to any one of these women. And thank you so much. We'll see you guys tomorrow. Thank you for being on.